Over the next 2 years, the Dawson family prospered. Jack had himself a small job doing what he loved best, drawing. A local cafe had taken him in on early of 1917 to paint and decorate the interior, was what he looked and worked in the evenings at the local theater, drawing posters for plays which were showing, and he loved both of his jobs. Although Rose didn't want him to need the money, he wanted to do something with his life. He was away from his wife and daughter most of the day, but he had 3 days and a week off, and they would be doing something special. Jack had suggested they try for another baby in February of 1917. Up to now, they had no luck. Jack had expected it for Rose to conceive, especially after Maggie was conceived, after that one night together. But that was 4 months ago, and Rose still wasn't pregnant. The past few years had been good. Maggie had begun school in September. Before, she loved her little uniform. She was only in school for 3 days a week, and she was at home and would complain bitterly of boredom and had not been able to see her friends. Jack had wanted to take her on a vacation, maybe to somewhere in America. He had wanted to travel Europe, but with the war going on over there at the minute, it wasn't a good idea. Boats had been sank, millions dead, and even the newspapers reporting more than thousands dead each day. The war had hit Jack somewhat more than it probably ever would have done. Just the slightest, though, he had just brought tears to his eyes. Poor widowed woman and fatherless children, mothers without sons, and just the thought of it was unbearable. The war was supposed to have been over by Christmas before, but it's still going strong, and Jack prayed to God that America wasn't going to join the war. He certainly did not want to point to this damn war nor an end. Just after Christmas, Rose had begun her dream as an actress on stage. She was only a dancer at first, and then a supporting role in the stage version of Midsummer, A Knight's Dream, a play that she loved doing since she was a child, and had read the books by William Shakespeare. A few more roles then secured Rose's place in the Montague Theatre and a serious and well-respected actress. It was a very small theatre, but in the summer months attracted a large audience. Rose was a very big hit, especially amongst several male actors who had asked Rose to accompany them on a few dates a few times, but Rose remained faithful and showed the ring before walking away. There were certainly some attractive males, but Rose was a married woman, with a daughter that she would certainly never had any interest in them in any way other than professional. Megan was now 4 years old and a little madam who loved splitting image of her mother. The Rose had become very proud of her daughter in the recent months. She had begun school and settled in perfectly. She had made many friends and was doing well. Megan knew that she wanted to do anything to get it, but it has been an apple of her father's eye. It wouldn't take long to get it. She had her mother's spirit and the wildness that had scared Jack a little to know that had been stubborn, fiery girls in his life. He chuckled as he thought of how uncontrollable they both were. Megan was growing to be the same girl Rose was when he met her. The young Rose had been just 17. Jack had even to think and check if she was really that young. She may have seemed like a young girl, but it was a woman in every day. Jack admired his wife very much, and he had loved her than he could never be put into mere words. The young 17-year-old society girl she had been, how amazingly and beautiful she had looked when she descended the grand staircase to him, and he had kissed her hand on the Titanic. God, that memory felt as if it wasn't real anymore. Rose had grown to be a very beautiful woman, dressed simply, wearing minimal makeup, and her curves had remained, especially after she had given birth to Maggie, and her hair was still the same fire that it had been when she had met. Jack lay in bed that night, and think that he must have done something to deserve this woman. He was a country boy from Wisconsin, who had never had much luck on girls, who lived under bridges and they could barely afford the next meal. But yet here he was, with a beautiful wife, a lovely daughter, a nice house, a good job, doing what he loved. Despite the war, life was good for the Dawsons. It was really good. In June, of 1917, the worst things ever imagined came to a reality. America declared a war. The newspapers reported Britain and France needed troops after many were lost at some and even Verdun. Now, upon regarding the newspaper, Jack had become angry and threw the paper in the bin before downing a shot of whiskey. It was a taste of horrendous and the liquid burnt in his throat, but he didn't care. He didn't understand. All he could do was hope and pray that he wouldn't be called into the war. In September of 1918, Jack had turned 26 and Rose then turned 23 in November, and they both celebrated with the family meal and the early New Year of 1918. There was more bad news. Philip had passed away during the early hours of January 4th, and he had been using a bandsaw when he was involved in the incident. The saw had cut through his stomach and he died instantly. Upon hearing the news, Rose had fainted in Jack's arms and was immediately taken to the hospital. The news couldn't be taken in. Philip was just 61. By no means he was very old. He had been like his father to Jack and Rose, like family. He had given them many opportunities when they first arrived in New York, given them food, a place to stay, a job, money, friendship. And he had been there when Megan was born. After the funeral, Philip's three daughters, Anne, Jean, and Marie, had returned to New York and promised to stay in touch. Megan's 5th birthday was on the 19th of January, and she had been a little angel in a white dress and her hair was done and plaited. Megan had always wanted long hair. Like mommy's, she would say. Megan's friends would gather around the table and sing happy birthday as Megan blew out her candles. A tear had escaped from Rose's eye as she saw how happy Megan was. She was far too young to understand what the word pain was. Megan had grew up with Uncle Philip and had taken as a stride when Rose explained to her that he's gone to live in heaven with the angels. The war was another thing Megan was far too young to understand. She would play in the garden with the neighbor's son, Andy, and they would play shoot each other. Life continued well for the Dawsons, considering the war and the loss of Philip. It wasn't until February of 1918 when the worst came. Rose Dawson awoke with a start. Her neck ached immensely from sleeping funny. Gently rubbing it, she started for Megan's room and found her asleep. "Come on, Angel. Up for school," Rose called. Megan spun around from her small bed and smiled as Rose opened the curtains. Rose laughed as her daughter was naturally an early bird, unlike her father, who probably loved his bed more than his family. "I'm up, Mummy." "Come on, brush your teeth and get dressed. I'll make breakfast soon." Megan nodded and did as she was told. Rose began breakfast. Tuesday was her morning to go to the school run. Jack worked from 6 in the morning and left around 5:30. Megan ate breakfast before Rose took her to school. On the return, Rose found a mail in her front door mat. Scanning, she found out it was not in the ordinary, just bills and such. A loud knock then came at the door, frightening Rose. Upon opening it, a plump man stood on the porch, holding a letter. "Letter from Mr. Dawson?" "I'm afraid he is not in at the moment," Rose frowned. "Are you a relative?" "I'm his wife." The man nodded. "Make sure he gets this, miss." Rose nodded and watched as the man turned away. She frowned and stared at the letter. How important could it be? She thought of opening it curiously, getting the better of her, but she just placed it on the table and pushed it back towards her thoughts. After Megan finished school, she was at a friend's house. Jack returned around 3, extremely good mood. Cafe was finally finished a job and he received nothing but a praise for it. Jack greeted his wife and a peck on her nose before slinging a backpack down and washing his hands. "Where's Megan?" Jack asked. "She's at Molly's," Rose answered, peeling a potato. "Oh, really? Maybe we could get started on the baby making then, huh?" Jack placed his arm around Rose from behind, and Rose blushed a little. Later, she said, "You have a letter, darling. A man delivered it for you." He knocked on the door and he sounds pretty important. Jack frowned, confused. He had no other family. No one ever mailed him. "Special delivery, hey?" Jack grinned, teasing. "Sing? Let's see, Rose. I am an important man." Jack raised his neck and acted like a snotty man. Rose laughed at his sense of humor and flicked water at him. "You big-headed," Rose trailed off, before Jack grabbed her and began to tickle her. Rose grabbed a wet potato and put it down Jack's shirt, and he shivered before picking it up. Rose, and then carrying her to the bedroom. He threw her onto the bed and tickled her once more, until the tickling became kissing, and the passion grew. The potatoes were soon forgotten, as the letter. About a half an hour, Jack emerged from the bedroom just wearing his trousers. He wandered into the living room, and sighed heavily, his hair messy and his face flustered. Rose followed, buttoning up her dress and fixing her hair. She giggled to herself before catching a sight of Jack's grin. "What happened to waiting for the baby making, Miss Dawson?" Jack flirted. "Hey, you just go pick up your daughter, all right?" Rose pointed at the door and picked up the potato and began to peel. "Or open your letter, Your Highness." Jack laughed and flicked his finger under the pillow and paper and ripped it. It was some sort of telegram from Washington, D.C. "Who do we know from Washington, D.C.?" Jack puzzled. Rose shook her head. Jack read the once, and then again. "Oh no. Oh shit!" Jack cursed, banging his head on the table. "What?" asked Rose, leaving the potatoes and grabbed the letter from Jack's hand. "No!" Rose cried. "You're been drafted?" Jack nodded. "How the hell can I be drafted? I'm only a child. I have a wife, a daughter to support." "Crap!" Jack cursed again. Rose watched his circled table with tears in her eyes. "Don't, Jack, you scare me." "Oh God, I'm sorry, sweetheart. I'm sorry." Jack then pulled his wife into his arms and cradled her for silent tears fell. This was the worst thing that was ever going to happen. He'd seen the pictures, read the articles, heard the gory details. Jack too felt a tear slide down his cheek and face. He knew that amounts of protesting, arguing, and crying could change the fact that he had to go. He would be taken away from his family, whether he liked it or not. His wife and his daughter, Rose could even be pregnant with their second child. How would Maggie cope without a father? He could die. He probably would die. He knew that. The Germans were cruel. Well, don't go, Jack. I'll do anything. I love you way too much. Rose's eyes were red and blurry. She grabbed Jack's arm and pleaded with him. "I have to go. You know if I do. If I don't, they'll put me in prison. And I don't want to do that, Rose. I don't want to leave you." Jack then stroked his wife's hair and then his cheek. "You could die, Jack. Megan loves you. She dotes you. She lives for you. I live for you. You're everything to us. I could be pregnant, Jack. We could have made a baby today. Then what? I have a baby alone? Raise it alone?" Jack sighed and lowered his head. It throbbed heavily. Tears escaped. "We'll run away, Jack. Anything." "Rose, that's breaking the law." "I don't care. I just want you safe." "Is that breaking the law?" Jack then shook his head, and then he sat on the chair and placed his head in his hands. It was a lot to take in. No matter what he did, he would be taken away from his family. He was sure of it. He couldn't face leaving his family. Just the thought of doing so made him sick to the bottom of his stomach. Anger rose inside of him. "Where would we go, Rose? The whole world is at war." "Jack, don't shout at me. Don't you dare take this out on me," Rose spat. This wasn't her fault. He was taking his anger out on her. She knew that he was angry, but arguing was not the answer. "I'm sorry." Jack kissed on top of Rose's head. "Australia?" Rose suddenly blurted out. "What?" Jack asked. "What about it?" Jack asked, confused at her randomness. "Australia isn't at war, Jack. We could go there, just to escape. It'll be better life there, especially for Maggie," Rose asked with hope in her voice. Jack bowed his head. However tempted as he was, it just wasn't possible. He couldn't risk getting caught or risking his family. Jack gazed up at Rose's eyes. They were hopeful. All she wanted was her family. It wasn't fair. Nothing was fair anymore. Jack squeezed his eyes shut and nodded slightly. "What? All right, Rose. We'll go there."